Welcome back to LexTalk, exploring English and linguistics in Thailand. For all of you educators, parents, and English language lovers, you're joining us for Season 2,
Episode 3.
where we're going to really dive deep into the minds of language learners.
Absolutely, yeah. This season, it's all about the brain, how it learns, especially important here in Thailand, where, English plays such a big role for so many people.
Yeah, for sure. And today we're tackling something that might surprise you. It's all about the connection between emotional intelligence and learning English.
Interesting.
I bet some of you out there have felt like, I'm just bad at languages, right? But what if it's not about being bad at all? What if it's about understanding the emotions that are involved?
Hmm. It's an area that I think is often overlooked. Crucial, though. This idea of emotional intelligence, we call it EQ for short.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, being nice or having good manners. It's really a set of skills for how we navigate our own emotions and the emotions of other people.
Okay, so let's unpack that a bit. What does EQ actually look like when we're, in the trenches trying to learn a language?
All right, so imagine a student, right? They're trying to learn Thai, trying to understand spoken Thai, but everyone's speaking so quickly and they're getting frustrated.
I can relate to that.
Right. Being self aware means recognizing that frustration and knowing that, hey, that frustration, it's actually getting in the way of my learning.
Oh, that makes total sense. I remember when I first started learning Thai, I was so nervous to speak,
Yeah.
worried about making mistakes in front of everyone. And honestly, I think I avoided speaking altogether a lot of the time because of that.
Yeah, classic language anxiety. And it can really hold learners back, can it?
Big time. It wasn't until I realized that my fear of making those mistakes, that was actually what was preventing me from really improving, from learning. I had to kind of become more self-aware about it to start to address the problem.
Yeah, so self awareness is that first crucial step. But then comes, okay, what do you do with that awareness, that self regulation?
So for me, it was about starting to practice speaking in like low pressure situations,
Hmm.
like with close friends or family, almost like creating a safe space for myself where I could, gradually build up my confidence.
Love that. Creating a safe and supportive environment is so, so important. And it sounds like you were tapping into motivation there too, which is another big piece of this EQ puzzle.
Now that you mention it, shifting my perspective to see mistakes as opportunities to learn, that really helped boost my motivation. I stopped focusing so much on being perfect and started celebrating even the small wins, the progress I was making.
It's the growth mindset in action. And it's amazing how powerful that shift can be. Instead of feeling defeated by mistakes, you use them to move forward.
For sure. It's like that aha, I get it now feeling after you finally figure out some tricky grammar point or something. But I'm just thinking, wouldn't like focusing too much on all these emotions be kind of distracting? Wouldn't it distract from the actual language learning part? I bet some people might say that.
Hmm. It's a valid concern for sure. But actually, there's quite a bit of research that suggests that particularly positive emotions can actually enhance our cognitive abilities. When we're happy, when we're relaxed, our brains are just more open and receptive to taking in new information.
Interesting.
On the other hand, when we're stressed, we're anxious, our brains kind of go into this fight or flight mode, which, as you can imagine, isn't exactly ideal for learning anything new.
So it's almost like by managing our emotions, we're not just feeling good, we're actually setting our brains up for language learning success. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. It changes the game. And don't forget about empathy, another key part of EQ. Let's say you're having a conversation in English with someone, and let's say it's with a Thai speaker. Being able to understand their tone, their little cues, that can make a world of difference in getting your meaning across, right?
Especially here in Thailand, where those cultural nuances play such a big part in how we communicate. Like, misinterpreting someone's tone, even slightly, could lead to all sorts of misunderstandings.
Exactly. And that's where empathy becomes so valuable. It helps you navigate all those subtle but important cultural differences. It helps you build stronger connections with the people you're talking to. And ultimately, that leads to better communication all around.
This is making me rethink how I approach language learning already. And it makes
Mhm.
me wonder about the teacher's role in all of this. What role do they play in fostering this emotional intelligence in the classroom, especially when it comes to English?
Oh, massive impact for sure. Teachers are role models. Their own EQ sets the tone for the entire classroom environment. Think about it.
Yeah, if a teacher gets visibly frustrated every time a student makes a mistake, I can imagine that anxiety would just spread like wildfire among all the other students in the room.
Exactly. It creates this whole fear failure dynamic.
Ugh. Yeah.
But a teacher with high EQ, on the other hand, they create a safe space, right? A
Mhm.
supportive environment where students feel okay taking risks, making mistakes, knowing they're not going to be judged for it.
It reminds me of that example we talked about before where the teacher emphasizes collaborative learning over competitive grading. That really helps create a sense of community and encourages students to support each other's learning rather than, tearing each other down.
Such a fantastic example. It shows how teachers can really use their EQ to create this positive learning environment where everyone feels comfortable expressing themselves, making mistakes, all that good stuff.
So it becomes about more than just teaching English. It's about cultivating a love for learning.
Exactly. And that's where emotional intelligence really shines. You're not just giving students language skills, you're equipping them with these valuable life skills that will serve them well far beyond the classroom.
Okay. So we've talked about how important emotional intelligence is,
Hmm.
especially for language learning. But now I'm wondering, what are some specific things that teachers can actually do, in their classrooms to really foster this EQ in their students, especially when they're teaching English?
All right, let's get practical. One simple yet powerful technique is encouraging self reflection. Imagine having students keep a journal. And in that journal, they reflect on their emotions during their English study. They ask themselves, how did I feel during today's speaking activity? What made it easier or harder for me? Things like that.
Okay, yeah. That's a really great way to get them to start connecting their feelings to their learning experience. I like that. It's very concrete. What about all those mindfulness and stress reduction techniques we hear so much about these days? Do those have a place in language learning too?
Fantastic tools. Even just a few minutes of deep breathing exercises or, guided meditations, those can work wonders to help students calm their nerves, to help them focus their attention. You can even build it right into the lesson plan. For example, before a big speaking activity, have everyone take a few deep breaths together.
That's such a good idea, just to kind of create a more relaxed and focused atmosphere in the room. And while we're talking about practical things, what about role-playing activities? Those could be really helpful for practicing social skills and empathy, right?
Absolutely. Imagine having students role play different scenarios where they have to use English to navigate social situations. Simple stuff, ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, anything like that. It allows them to apply those EQ skills in a safe, controlled environment.
And it makes learning English feel so much more relevant to their daily lives, which I bet is really motivating for students.
You got it. It's about creating these engaging, authentic learning experiences that go beyond the textbook, beyond those worksheets.
It's interesting. We hear so much about the importance of creating a safe space for language learning,
Mhm.
but we rarely talk about the emotional aspect of it. It's like we've been missing this crucial piece of the puzzle all along.
Totally agree. I think by acknowledging and really addressing this emotional side of language learning, we can really empower our students to not just learn English, but to truly thrive in all aspects of their lives.
Well, this has been really eye-opening. We've explored all these different components of emotional intelligence, how they can be practically applied to language learning, both from the learner's perspective and from the teacher's perspective.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There is so much more to uncover when it comes to this fascinating connection between EQ and language acquisition.
Before we go to our next segment, we're going to be talking about memory and language retention. I want to hear from you, our listeners. Have you noticed this connection between emotional intelligence and your own language learning?
Have you tried any of these strategies we've talked about today?
We would love for you to share your insights, your stories in the comments below. We always love hearing from our engaged listeners.
And don't forget to follow LexTalk on all of our platforms. We're on our website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, and Spotify.
You can find us everywhere just by searching for @LexTalk Podcast. Join our community of language enthusiasts from Thailand and around the world.
Welcome back to LexTalk, everyone.
We're diving even deeper now into this fascinating world of emotional intelligence and how it really impacts language learning, right here in Thailand.
Especially for, us as English educators and language enthusiasts, it's something we think about a lot.
It really is. And it's funny, sometimes I think we can get so caught up in like the more technical stuff, the grammar, the vocabulary, the pronunciation, all that.
All the building blocks, yeah,
We kind of forget about the emotional side of things.
which can be just as important for success. as we've been saying.
Oh, for sure. And it's not just about the learners either, right? The teachers, they have such a huge role in fostering that positive emotional environment in the classroom.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, a teacher who really models that emotional intelligence, that can make a world of difference for their students, don't you think?
I think so too. Yeah, like
Yeah.
if a teacher is patient, understanding, encouraging, students are so much more likely to feel comfortable taking those risks, making those mistakes. That's part of it.
And
Yeah.
that's huge. That sense of safety, it's so crucial for language learning. Because if students are always walking on eggshells, worried about being judged or ridiculed, they're not going to want to experiment. They're not going to want to truly engage with the learning process.
Exact.
And it goes beyond creating a safe space, too. It's about equipping students with the emotional skills, the tools, to actually navigate those inevitable challenges that come with learning a language. So, for example, a student who's really self-aware, they're going to be able to recognize, okay, I'm feeling frustrated right now, I'm feeling discouraged. And then they can use those EQ skills to kind of, okay, how do I manage these emotions?
It's true, because learning a language, any language, let's face it, it can be tough. There can be times when you hit a wall, you want to give up. But if you have those skills, those
Yeah.
emotional intelligence skills, you're more likely to, keep going. You're more likely to persevere.
Resilience, that's the key word. And that's another area where teachers can make a huge impact, right? By fostering this growth mindset in the classroom. Teachers can help students see those setbacks, not as failures, but as opportunities for learning and growth.
Yeah, I love that. Turning those lemons into lemonade. And speaking of positive experiences, how can teachers actually create more of those in the classroom? What are some things they can do?
Well, one thing that comes to mind is incorporating more collaborative learning activities. Rather than always focusing on that individual achievement and that competition, why not encourage students to actually work together, to support each other's learning?
Yeah. That reminds me of the example we were talking about earlier about the teacher who, emphasizes collaborative learning over the competitive grading. It creates such a different dynamic in the classroom. Suddenly students are all in it together, working towards a common goal.
Exactly. It's that sense of community. And that can be so empowering, especially for those students who might be struggling or feeling a bit insecure about their language abilities.
It all comes back to that sense of belonging, that connection, which honestly I think is missing from a lot of traditional language classrooms.
I agree. I think sometimes we get so focused on the cognitive side of language learning that we forget about the social and the emotional dimensions, which, let's be real, they're all interconnected.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole idea of emotional intelligence so fascinating. It's not just a set of soft skills. It's really a fundamental part of how we learn, how we interact with the world around us.
And it's something that we can all continue to develop and refine throughout our lives. There's no end point, right?
So I'm curious, what are some, specific strategies that teachers can use to actively promote emotional intelligence in those English classrooms? And we talked about journaling, mindfulness earlier. But what else? What other practical techniques come to mind?
Well, one that I found to be really effective is role playing because it gives students a chance to practice their social skills, their empathy, but in a really safe and controlled environment.
Oh, I love role playing. Yeah, it's almost like they get to try on different social situations, experiment with different ways of expressing themselves.
Exactly. And you can get really creative with the scenarios. You can have them navigating cultural differences, resolving conflicts, or just practicing, simple everyday conversations. It's a fun and engaging way to get them, using those EQ muscles while they're also improving their language skills.
Yeah. And it takes the pressure off too, right? Because it's not about being perfect. It's not about getting the right answer. It's about exploring those possibilities, learning from each other.
That's such a great point. And it all ties back to that growth mindset that we were talking about. Mistakes are seen as opportunities for learning, not as failures.
And I think that's, maybe a key takeaway from our discussion today. Emotional intelligence isn't about being perfect. It's not about always having it all together. It's about that awareness of our emotions, managing them effectively, and using them to really enhance our learning and, honestly, our lives.
Well said. I think it's time to move on to our next segment now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so too.
Where we'll be exploring the fascinating world of memory and how it all plays into language retention.
Oh, exciting.
But before we do that, let's take a moment to talk to our listeners directly.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode so far.
Have you noticed a connection between emotional intelligence and your own language learning experiences?
Have you tried any of the strategies that we've talked about today?
Share your insights, your stories down in the comments below. We always love hearing from you, our engaged listeners.
And don't forget to follow LexTalk on all of our platforms.
You can find us on website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, Spotify. You name it, we're probably there.
Just search for @LexTalk Podcast. Join our community. It's growing. Language enthusiasts from Thailand and all over the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back to dive into that fascinating world of memory and language learning.
Looking forward to it.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to LexTalk, everyone.
We're wrapping up our deep dive into emotional intelligence and language learning. But before we go, there's one more layer to this I think is worth pointing out.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What haven't we covered yet?
Well, we've talked a lot about how emotional intelligence can help learners manage their anxiety, stay motivated, connect with others, all that.
Right, right. And how teachers can create that, supportive and engaging learning environment.
Exactly. But there's also this fascinating idea that emotional intelligence can actually have an impact on your cognitive abilities too.
Wait, hold on. Are you saying that, like, being emotionally intelligent can actually make you smarter?
In a way, yeah. There's research that suggests that when we're in a positive emotional state, our brains are just more receptive to new information. They're more open to it.
I can see that.
Hmm.
When you're feeling happy and relaxed, you're just more open to learning new things in general.
Yeah,
You're not as resistant, not as stressed.
precisely. And on the flip side, when we're stressed or anxious, our brains kind of go into that fight or flight mode that we've all heard about.
So basically, our brains are too busy worrying about survival to be bothered with, learning new vocabulary words.
Exactly. So in a way, by cultivating emotional intelligence, we're not just creating a more pleasant learning experience for ourselves, we're actually creating the optimal conditions for our brains to really absorb and retain new information, including new languages.
I love that. It's like we're priming the pump for language acquisition.
There you go. Perfect analogy. So it really is about more than just feeling good. It's about setting our brains up for success.
I think that's a great point. So, wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about, understanding all the different components of EQ, exploring those practical strategies for, promoting it in the classroom, even touched on how it impacts our cognitive function. That's pretty amazing.
It's been a real journey. We've explored this emotional side of language learning. Who knew it was so complex?
Right. And it's a journey, I think, that has the potential to really transform how we approach language education, not just here in Thailand, but everywhere. So before we say goodbye, I want to say a huge thank you to all our listeners for joining us on this exploration of emotional intelligence.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights, and maybe you're even feeling a little inspired to incorporate some of these ideas into your own language learning, whether you're a student or a teacher.
And remember, this is just the beginning. There's always so much more to learn and discover about this fascinating topic.
So much more. Don't forget to follow LexTalk on all our platforms to keep learning with us.
You can find us on our website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, SoundCloud, and Spotify.
Just search for @LexTalk Podcast and join our amazing, vibrant community of language enthusiasts.
Until next time, keep talking, keep learning.
And keep Lex talking.
Goodbye, everyone.